Fish Unfiltered, episode 60. My name is Kevin Barral. I am your host, and I am here with my co-host Isaac Azout. We have Ely Sussman, and we have a very, very special guest, Aram Leighton of Just Baseball. Aram, what's up? We're very excited to have you. Not much minor league talk per se, but definitely going to dive into a couple prospects that may come Miami's way come July 31st.
Yeah, I love that intro, by the way. That was awesome. I'm glad to be on. Always fun to be on with you guys. And hopefully they'll make some moves where we'll have some prospects to talk about when it happens. But it's speculation time, and I always enjoy doing that. So pumped to talk about it with you guys.
As always, we are sponsored by MPT College Consulting every, I believe, Fish on First podcast. You can make sure to go check them out. And as always, give us a 5-star review, subscribe on YouTube, all that good stuff to help us out. So I guess we could just quickly run through the guys that are probably going to be the hottest candidates. Obviously, Luzardo was by far at the top, but pitching injuries have definitely hurt the Marlins. Luzardo goes down. Braxton goes down. The only pitcher left from the 2024 opening day rotation right now is Trevor Rogers, and he is maybe someone who teams would be interested in. But Isaac, at this point, really doesn't look like Luzardo's getting traded unless a team really values what they could get for him next season.
Right. No, that's a foregone conclusion. Unfortunately, it just wouldn't make sense for either party involved in a trade to be messing around with Jesus Luzardo. Obviously, his max value was last offseason. I do think he will have considerable value this offseason. I wonder if it'll be in Miami's best interest to wait until following deadline in 2025, where he'll still have a year and a half of control, sort of show that he can be back to his 2023 self. We'll have to wait and see, but wishing nothing but a speedy recovery for Luzardo. And since we're just talking about the Marlins injured pitchers, just so everyone's aware of the amount of starting pitchers Miami has on the road in the IL, it's Sandy Alcantara, Jesus Luzardo, Yuri Perez, Edward Cabrera, Ryan Weathers, Braxton Garrett will be joining them, and Sixto Sanchez and Brian Hoeing, if you want to throw him in there as well. This has got to be the most talented IL rotation in the history of Major League Baseball. Am I wrong?
Definitely up there at least.
I don't know. It's up there. I mentioned that as well, and I got pretty quick feedback that the Astros right now basically have their entire 2022 rotation from Verlander to Luis Garcia to Lance McCullers. They've had guys that haven't even pitched all year for them. I think that's comparable. So
the Rays IL rotation is pretty nasty too. It's like Shane McClanahan, Jeffrey Springs, Drew Rasmussen, and then Shane Boss. That one I think would be better than a lot of teams' regular rotations as well. But to your point, like that is a loaded IL rotation.
And of all those guys, how many of them would have been trade bait this year? I don't really want to talk about Sandy and Yuri. We just don't really know. But Cabrera, Braxton Garrett, Ryan Weathers, Jesus Luzardo especially, all of those guys I think Miami was counting on to be able to unload this trade deadline, or Peter Bendix was, and get some significant value. But now we're going to get into all the guys that are most likely to be traded, but they're really not. They don't have as many pieces as they would have liked.
And to be fair, Cabrera, maybe Philly is when he could be back potentially. Obviously, he was put on the 60-day, but that's just a retroactive thing to open up the 40-man spot. But we're recording this on June 23rd, so we're still just over a month away from the deadline. But right now, just going to quickly scroll through the names that make sense as the top candidates. We have Tanner Scott, Brian De La Cruz, Jazz Chisholm Jr., all the relievers that aren't Tanner Scott. We could note Josh Bell real quick, but $16 million, it's definitely tough to move. And then finally, Trevor Rogers, I think, is the name that should be mentioned. But we're going to go with a cool experiment, I guess we could say. I think Isaac, Eli, and I all have 2 trades each. And Aram is going to let us know if we're really bad at this or we're hitting the nail on the head. So Isaac, we could start with you, then we'll go Eli, and then I'll wrap it up with my trade. So we'll do one each first, and then we'll do another round after.
Me first, huh? All right, Mr. General Manager Aram. We got to give him credit. I think he was the one that noted in 2021 that Brian De La Cruz would get traded to the Marlins. That was wild.
I'll never top that. I'll never top an exact trade for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
Brian De La Cruz might end up going, at this deadline as well. So that could be a guy that I don't know if I'll be able to predict what they get for him, but the old Yimi Garcia, Brian De La Cruz deal. That's the peak.
I think we got to give Kim Ng a lot of credit for that one. 2 months of very inconsistent Yimi Garcia, and they've had their starting outfield for the last 3-4 years. So Anyway, let's get into it. My first one, I mean, listen, we got it. You're in New York, Aram. Eli's in New York as well. We got to talk a Yankees trade. The Yankees late inning relief situation has been a little iffy. The Marlins have arguably the best reliever in Major League Baseball. I think he's one of the best Marlins relievers of all time. Tanner Scott has just been incredible. And my trade that Peter Bendix will make this offseason will be Tanner Scott and left-hander Andrew Nardi to New York in exchange for Roderick Arias, the Yankees shortstop prospect. He's number 4 according to MLB Pipeline. He is in low A ball. He's a little bit of a glove first guy, switch hitter, far from the big league, something that Miami seems to be targeting at this point in their, I guess, evolution to become a consistent winner. But like I said, 2 left-handed relievers, really dominant relievers. Nardi obviously had that really tough start to the year, but he has started to look more like himself. And obviously his expected ERA is almost 2.5 runs lower than his actual ERA. So I think he has a lot of value given all the years of control. And they'd be getting 2 months of the best closer in baseball.
So honestly, I was expecting the first trade to be one where I'm like, I think that might be an overpay from a prospect perspective. I honestly think that the Marlins might be giving up too much there because when you, of course, it takes me right into like the Nardi meme here. And I know people are like, oh, of course, Aram just doesn't want to trade Nardi. No, Nardi with that much control. Tanner Scott, I understand he's a rental, but I'm sure you guys have talked about this. Like there's going to be a bidding war for this guy because he's clearly just, I think, the best relief arm on the market, as you alluded to. But Arias would be a great get for the Marlins, no doubt about it. But we're talking about 35, 36% strikeout rate right now in low A, a guy that I think has probably slipped value-wise from the start of the season because I think a big reason why a lot of people were excited about him was what is he going to do first year off the complex? We know he's got big power potential. You mentioned it. The glove is really good at short. What is it going to look like? Usually if a guy gets off to a hot start, it's that helium, he explodes, or he starts to show some more signs of concern. There was question about the swing and miss, and now he's kind of validating that question. So yeah. I think he's a viable target for the Marlins, no doubt. But I don't even know if they need to attach like a Nardi to that. I almost wonder if he's attainable with just Scott and maybe something else, some sort of filler, or even one of those weird trades where you see, you're a guy and a prospect go for another prospect. But I think it's that in-between spot where Nardi's probably a little bit too much with his control. And then, maybe just Scott's not quite enough. But I think with the way that the market's going to kind of percolate for Nardi and with where Arias is trending a little bit and the Yankees' willingness to move off of guys who are far off, even if it's a little bit more of an overpay, quote unquote, I think it's a great start, but I don't even think you need to include Nardi. Maybe it's Fauché instead of Tanner Scott. I think that's a little more fair. Yeah. I mean, I was probably not giving Nardi enough credit there. But maybe Fauché, a right-handed reliever with Tanner Scott for Arias. Because I don't think I would love to have, Chase Hampton. There's a couple of guys that I would really like, but I just don't see Miami really targeting any of those other guys. I think Roderick Arias is the one they would want. And I think, maybe Scott alone. You got to overpay if you're the buyer. That's just rules. Especially because every major market team is going to want Tanner Scott. I'm sure you guys saw that headline. It was like pick all of the best teams, basically, all interested in Tanner Scott. So that's good news for the Fish.
And Eli, I want to go to you real quick before we go into yours, because you were talking to us about Nardi, funny enough, and telling us you think he's probably more valuable than Tanner Scott, or he's going to bring back the most out of all of the Marlins relievers. So maybe just take us through that thought. And if you do have a Nardi trade, I don't know if you do. I mean, now would be your time to tell us.
No, it is an excellent segue. Also, because Aram mentioned the concept of having one of those deals where you trade desirable major league guy and one of your own prospects in order to get a better prospect in return. So I have one of that kind of framework going on right here, and we'll see whether or not it adds up. So this is what the Royals, they're slipping. They're one of the beautiful stories in baseball this year, and all of a sudden it is slipping away. They are 3-11 in their last 14 games, but they're still comfortably above 500. They still have a lot of motivation to win. Their fans are fired up. They can't just sit out this deadline. Just because they're ahead of schedule does not mean they can take their foot off the gas. They need help, especially in high leverage relief. And I think Nardi is really good fit, especially for a team that is still, they're never going to be a big market team. The years of control are really valuable for them. And Nardi is still pre-ARB, so he has a bunch of years ahead of him. And I don't think people have realized how good Nardi has been lately. He's back to pretty much his 2023 self. He got off to a really awful start. I think people may have remembered that his performance with inherited runners totally flipped around. He was choking in a lot of big situations in April, but he's walked one batter since the end of April. So he's a high leverage guy that absolutely pounds the strike zone. And I mean, the run prevention has been good as well. It's an ERA in the mid twos. You just take out the first couple weeks of the season. Now the strikeout rate is down a little bit. The dominance against lefties isn't quite what it was last year, but still, I mean, he's really desirable out there. I don't think he's enough to get the really intriguing guy that I want from the Royals. So I'm going to attach left-hander Emmett Olson to him. He was the 4th round pick that the Marlins got last year in the draft. And he's been performing really well now up to the high A level, but they kind of have this, I mean, I hesitate to say that they have like a surplus, but they have a really deep, all these pitchers that are kind of on the same timeline right now in high A. So they can, I think more so than some of their other pitching prospects, they can afford to move Emmett Olson. I think his stock is up a little bit from where it was when he was drafted. I want to bundle Nardi, a piece of their present for the Royals, and then Olson, who's still a couple of years away from maybe being a back-end starter guy. And I want in return the Royals' 1st round pick last year, Blake Mitchell. Who I think that was a pretty controversial pick that high in the draft last year. He's a catcher. This year he's splitting time between catcher and DH. He's only at low A, but he's raking so far. I'm sure Aram will remind us that his strikeout issues are almost as bad as Arias. He does have some swing miss concerns. He has huge platoon splits. So I don't know if this guy is a future starter. And I know on Just Baseball, you don't have him in your top 100 prospects, but a couple other lists are a bit higher on him. Nardi and Olson for Blake Mitchell. Do you think that is a fair and sensible deal?
I think in a vacuum, yes. I just wonder about the optics of, we took this guy in the 1st round last year and we're trading him for a reliever and a 4th round arm. I know that the Royals really like Blake Mitchell too. Clearly. I mean, you mentioned the controversial pick aspect. Like they love him. I think it would be hard. I also look at like Carter Jensen's emerged this year a little bit. It was his former second, third round pick for them, catcher as well. They also have Caden Wallace, a 3rd baseman who's like a little bit of a tweener as well, that I think they're going to say, well, how about these guys? So I look at Gavin Cross, our other former 1st round pick. He's performing a little bit better. You want to take him? I do have some concern that Mitchell just might not be available in a deal like that, just because he is their top prospect. I think for me, I prefer Ramon Ramirez, but he's a guy that's at the complex right now. He's their top prospect, I think, in a lot of, probably in their own minds as well. And they just took him in the 1st round last year. It might be a tough sell, I think, but they are getting a reliever for how many years? 5 Nardi would be after this year. And we saw, I mean, it didn't work out, but Scott Efros was moved with like 4+ years of control for Hayden Wisniewski at the peak of his value as, you know, a really exciting arm at the time. So it's possible, but I would say that would shock me. That would be an all-time, I think, like really exciting. I wouldn't say all-time because it's new, but I would say that'd be a statement move from Bendix, because it'd be pretty hard to pry away a Blake Mitchell, I think.
Yeah. So I went with a Tanner Scott trade to start it off. I think, honestly, probably all 3 of us had one in there. And I have him going to Chicago. The Cubs have had their bullpen issues. I wrote an article about this one, so I think it was a pretty easy one to click up. I don't know if maybe this one makes a lot of sense I don't even know, but I'll throw it out there. I have a straight swap of Tanner Scott for outfield prospect Kevin Alcantara, who I really, really, really like. I love Kevin Alcantara. Lowered the strikeout rate last season. He's not walking as much as he did. Actually, because he didn't get too much action in Double-A, but it's 27%. He is 107 WRC plus, not putting up the same numbers he did last year. Maybe the value is a little bit lower, but I was talking to Eli, center field. That's definitely a possibility for him if he decides to move on from Jazz at one point. And Chicago gets the lights out closer that they really need right now. I mean, it makes a lot of sense for the Marlins. This is a guy who is still a couple of years out. They are in no rush to push him up to AAA at all. He could stay at AA for the remainder of the year. And if he starts to really hit it like he used to, he could definitely get up there to AAA. But I think a 1-for-1 swap makes sense here for the Marlins.
I like that. I like that a lot because he's volatile for sure. And I think that's why the Cubs might be willing to move off of him, potentially, especially in an instance where, they're getting a guy that can, put them over the top from the bullpen perspective, and they need a bullpen guy real bad. I do wonder, it depends on probably what position they're in. If they're not in as good of a spot to potentially make the playoffs, or they're a little bit more on the outside looking in, maybe they're not, willing to do that for a rental. But when you look at the system right now, Pete Crow Armstrong's already in a spot where he's not getting enough opportunity to play every day because of their outfield situation. Since Mike Tauchman went down, that's helped, to get PCA more reps. But Owen Casey is also ahead in the pecking order of the outfield situation as well. They're still trying to figure out where James Triantis is going to play. He might end up in the outfield. And they've already got guys that are not going anywhere for a while at the big league level in the outfield as well. So I think for the Marlins, take a chance on a guy that is toolsy as can be. You're still kind of waiting for it all to come together, but he's 21. It's just a kind of a prospect fatigue guy because he was in that Anthony Rizzo trade years ago also. So you feel like he's way older than he really is. I think it's very possible. That's a fun one that I think, he would instantly become, I think, one of the higher upside guys that the Marlins have in the system, if not the highest upside guy the Marlins would have in the system outfield wise, with the timeline of 2025 to at least give it a shot.
And it probably needs to be noted, most of the guys we're probably going to mention here will probably go towards the top of our list and on the Fishing Tips top 30. I would say top 5, maybe top 7. So Alcantara would definitely be probably, if not the best position player prospect, he should be up there. So, and same with what Eli mentioned. Blake Mitchell could probably be the best prospect in the system, maybe right behind Noble or Thomas, and same goes with Isaac's guys.
Another name in the Cubs system, something I keep thinking about. I'm curious what you guys think about this. The Marlins, how do the Marlins get a shortstop for next year, other than potentially a trade at this? I'm not even kidding. The free agency is brutal. They don't have anybody internally. And I'm like, is there someone that they can add at the deadline that they could just plug in at some point next year? The one guy I look at is Luis Vasquez. He's not very exciting in that Cubs system, but he is a legitimate Gold Glove caliber defender at shortstop. He is a special glove. We'll see if he can hit his weight, at the highest level, but he is a guy that's put up decent numbers in AAA. If the Cubs were to theoretically say no on Alcantara, that's too steep, a prospect slightly lesser than Alcantara and Luis Vasquez maybe in there as well, could be of interest, because that's a guy that I think instantly becomes their best option at shortstop, even if he's putting up a 680 OPS. I think he would be a guy that would be a net positive for them there too. So that's a name to watch that I think they could move off of, because he is holding a 40-man spot right now for the Cubs.
Yeah, the only other name I could think of internally would be Xavier Edwards, which it seems like they really are adamant about putting this guy at shortstop. I think Eli may have correct me. I think he came back either yesterday for the first time in a while, Xavier Edwards. And again, he's at shortstop. That's all he's been playing since coming back from his injury. Came up with the Marlins, played 2 games at shortstop. If it's not Xavier Edwards, that's definitely a good backup plan at least.
Well, yeah, they're giving him an opportunity, at least in AAA, that he didn't have last year. Last year, he was at second base in deference to Jacob Amaya, and now they don't really have an obvious alternative, of course. So they're trying their best, but I think Aram and I are on the same page with Edwards that unless his arm just magically goes up a grade or 2, it's just doesn't play at short. Yes. So they're giving him reps. I think it looks a little bit better than it used to. That's that's something they'll find out, barring a trade for somebody like this. I guess it's a guy that gets a tryout second half of the season to do it a little bit in the big leagues, but he looks like a second baseman. That's just the reality.
Alrighty, Mr. Isaac, second and last one.
I had to sort of pivot to something else because you had one of my guys, but this is contingent on the Pirates continuing to play well. I think that division stinks, and I think that they might have enough. I know they have those 2 guys at the top of the rotation, very fun guys, but I think they could use some help, and I think that Jazz Chisholm Jr. gets traded to the Pirates.
Ooh.
In exchange. I had to add a little piece. I think he's got the sweetest swing in the minor leagues. I want Tamar Johnson as the main piece coming back, and I want them to buy low on Mitch Jeb. 2 for 1. Jazz Chisholm Jr. to the Pittsburgh Pirates. Imagine him, O'Neill, Cruz in that lineup with Jones and Skeens in the rotation. There you go. And I can see them extending Jazz too if they want. Let them deal with Jazz. I think that's the move.
And they need a center fielder too.
All right. Well, they have Sawinski playing out there. Ryan Reynolds stinks in the outfield. I think it would take Termarr Johnson to do that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the Pirates system is, I think, is loaded pitching wise as you're going to find. I mean, what they've got, of course, with Skeens, and then even the guys at the top, at the big league level that have solidified and graduated there. But that's not even including Bubba Chandler, Anthony Solomito, Thomas Harrington. I mean, I could go on. Mike Burrow is coming back off of TJ. Several other arms that are really exciting and solid too. So I'd imagine if they're adding, they're going to want to try to trade from those arms. But at the same time, they are probably going to go get a bat in this year's draft. I think they picked 9th, if I remember correctly. And I'm imagining one of the high school bats kind of falling into their lap there. So does that make them more willing to move off of one of these bats? Are they frustrated at this point that Termarr Johnson hasn't quite, put it all together to the degree that they were hoping? And he is limited to second base. So maybe they do feel as though, you know what? We're kind of hoping that Termarr Johnson becomes something like Jazz Chisholm at the highest level in terms of his offense. Like, why not just get the bird in hand here and help our team now and later? I'd imagine that, Pirates fans probably freak out at that thought. And again, I do think that there is a level of the optics thing when you talk about a guy that they've kind of plastered his face in a lot of places. This is the future. This is what we're going to build towards. But at the same time, when you're getting a Jazz Chisholm who his face has been plastered everywhere as well, and you can market that, I think it becomes a lot more justifiable. I think Jeb in there as well becomes difficult because now those are their 2 middle infielders. And now their best middle infield prospect would be Sung-Chae Chang, I believe.
Sung-Chae Chang.
Yeah. So like that part makes it tough. I think if you could pivot from a Termarr, like from a Mitch Jeb to somebody else, I could see it being
my problem is that of all the pitchers that they have, like all the ones you mentioned, it was Bubba Chandler. I think he's the one that would intrigue Miami the most for obvious reasons. And I think he's a little bit further from the big leagues than the other 2. And I just thought that would be an overpay. And I'm not going to be here.
It'd be too much.
It'd be way too much. So that's why, but you're right. Maybe it should be one of those pitchers, but a trade around those 2. Those are the 2 main pieces. Jazz Chisholm Jr. going to Pittsburgh, Termarr Johnson, and a pitching prospect, a low-level pitching prospect, mid-level pitching prospect for Jazz, and along with Termarr.
That's fun. I like that. Again, it would depend on how quickly maybe they've adjusted internally on Termarr. He's clearly not the 70 hit tool guy that he was branded as. And I think it's one of the more fascinating developments of a prospect where he's not the 70 hit tool, like 40 power guy that he was branded as, but he's also not the 40 power guy who's branded as. He's got easy plus power. So kind of reevaluating who this guy is, but at the same time, he's 5'8", he's a little bit maxed out. So maybe they might realize, hey, we were probably a little ambitious here. Let's cash in while we can, because if he's 22 and still doing the same thing, he's not getting you a Jazz Chisholm. So I think it's possible, but again, it does depend on, I guess, how they feel internally. I do like it, and he's a great option for the Marlins. And he instantly becomes a guy that, even if he doesn't fully pan out to what you're hoping, becomes one of their best infield options, and a guy that can at least get to the big leagues a little bit, within a couple of years, which I think they're probably looking at least guys that can get there within a couple of years.
And he's someone that has the strikeout issues, of course. And that's just like, dude, I've been following the Marlins for a very long time. They won't go after someone unless he's got a K rate of over 28%. It's impossible. They just won't do it. If you're king like Xavier, I'm surprised they got Xavier Edwards, honestly.
At MPT College Consulting, they pride themselves on helping clients navigate the college application process. This includes preparation for standardized testing, guidance through high school, assistance with essays and applications, and choosing the right college. Their work is always geared towards the specific needs of the individual client as they strive to make this process as stress-free for the family as possible. Visit them today at mptcollegeconsulting.com to learn more about their services and schedule a free consultation. Alrighty, Eli.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so this one's not quite as sexy. We have an extended piece on Brian De La Cruz on the site about him because with the Mariners in town, it just really struck me that they're in first place. They have a decent cushion, but the Astros are coming. The Rangers are coming. They need to add offense. Their right-handed hitting options in their outfield, aside from Julio, they really need help. They brought back the corpse of Mitch Haniger, and he's not doing it for them. They signed everybody wanted the Marlins to go for Mitch Garver in free agency last year.
Yeah.
The Mariners get him. He has the lowest batting average among guys with at least as many at-bats as he has, with 200 plus at-bats. He's been a bust for them, unfortunately. They have Victor Robles as even a platoon guy. That's like they picked him up off the scrap heap to play part-time in the left field for them. So I think DLC is a clear upgrade for them now. He also has 3 more years of control after this year, and I think there's value to it. Not, he's not a flashy guy. He never has quite performed as well as the underlying batted ball data would suggest, but he's on pace for 30 homers. He can handle righties and lefties, and he's been more consistent this year than ever before. So I think there's going to be teams interested, especially because just the lack of alternatives on the market when it comes to decent hitting corner outfielder. So I think there's a market for him, and I think Seattle is the place for him. I have 2 versions of this, so I guess that makes it really easy with this deal. The one piece that I want included is third baseman Ben Williamson, who was their second-round pick last year, putting up good OBP numbers, solid defensive third baseman. He's already at AA after being drafted last year. Really lacking in the power department from a typical third baseman so far. That being said, he's playing against a lot older competition and doing well, and that's a position of need in the Marlins organization. They've Jacob Berry playing way too much third base for my liking in Pensacola right now. So this is kind of an obvious place to upgrade.
They've got to been right a little bit now.
And yes, and it's not. I'm not going to take too many shots at Jacob Berry beyond what I already have to this point. Want Ben Williamson. Now the question is whether how much you can dream about this second piece. The optimistic view is having Ty Pete included in there. He is a young prep shortstop who he's performing relatively well so far this season. And I enjoy watching his highlights. I think it's a bigger question about how that actually looks at higher levels, but he was the 30th overall pick during that same draft class so far. I think, and so that might be a little optimistic to get both Ty Pete and Williamson in here. And if that is, then instead of Pete, the alternative that I was thinking of was Dwell Joseph, who was the top international signing from the Mariners class this past year. He's in the DSL right now, off to a relatively slow start, but $3 million bonus. His measurables are actually kind of similar to Ty Pete. It's just that he's a couple years away from that trajectory. So DLC for Ben Williamson. Do you think Williamson and Ty Pete, is that doable, or do I have to swap Pete out for Dwell Joseph? I
think you probably got to swap him out for Dwell Joseph, because I think with Ty Pete, everything I keep hearing from just those that have seen him, some scouts and also I just know the Mariners, they're really excited about what he can be. I mean, this is one of the younger guys in the class from last year. He's 18 and typically a little bit different from what they have liked to target. They like those higher floor guys, hit tool guys. They've done a really good job drafting those types. And then I think they swung for the fences with those 3 first-round picks going a little bit more volatile with Pete. And so far, he's really held his own, in low A, and has looked really solid. And then with the performance of Williamson, where, as you mentioned, just getting off to such a good start, his value has got nothing but up. And they're even playing him at short a little bit too, because he's so short-handed at third. I was curious how he was going to handle professional competition, out of William and Mary, what that jump was going to look like for him. And clearly, as you mentioned, he has made that jump pretty seamlessly. I think Williamson is the perfect target for the Marlins. That's been a name that I kind of looked at as no-brainer for them to cash in on the Mariner side, and also, for the Marlins, a no-brainer to add into the fold. I think Joseph probably much more likely further off, and they have several other guys at the complex even that are going to be getting a lot more reps than him, and like a Felnine Celestin, who's now made it stateside, but that's like one of their main guys, and several others I think that they're interested in. That I don't think would make it too difficult to move off of them. I was curious what you thought, though. Do you feel like for the Marlins, it makes more sense to go for those guys that are farther off, that, you probably have valued at the same as maybe a Jonathan Clase, who's pretty much big league ready, but comes with a little bit less upside and, things like that? Because I think that could be a guy that I see them potentially moving off of. And the Marlins probably need a center fielder, too.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
But I do think that Ty Pete might be too difficult to pry away at this point. But I do like the Williamson start. And then I guess it becomes, what do you think? Would you rather have the guy that's closer to the big leagues and plugs right in, or the high upside piece that could end up, altering your outlook if it works out?
Yeah, I haven't been able to talk to too many people about this. I'm just going off of the previous acquisitions that they've made. And obviously it's Peter Benning's not Kim anymore, who traded away some far from the big league guys like Marco Vargas and Ronald Hernandez. So I just don't know exactly what they're looking for. I don't know if they're looking to get their plug-ins guys from trades in this deadline, or they're just going to go sign Tim Andersons next year and plug them in center field and stuff. I don't know what they're going to do, but I'll try and ask around a little bit more, because it really is interesting. Who are we supposed to target? Who are they going to target? Are they going to be targeting AA guys, AAA guys, or, FCL low A guys? So it really changes things immensely.
And that's the interesting thing too, because you look at the Arise trade, for example, it wasn't one specific type of multiple guys. It's two AA guys, one guy who was already DFA'd and Wusa Go, who's now in AAA, he's been all right with the numbers. And then you have Dylan Head, who's now out for the year and was a 19-year-old, I think. So when you look at that one trade, they went after everything there. So we'll see what they do.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal the team from Isaac in Pittsburgh and the player from Eli and Brian De La Cruz. And I'm going to say Brian De La Cruz is going to be a Pittsburgh Pirate in exchange for Mitch Jebb and Jun-Silk Shim. So they'll get a pitcher in return who's been all right. And then they get Mitch Jebb, who, as Isaac said, they're gonna buy low on there. So two names that the Marlins were interested in during the offseason, if you guys remember, for that Edward trade. So yeah, those infamous rumors. So I went with those two guys for DLC. I had other moves out there, but I went with the safe bet here for the purpose of this experiment.
So you went Mitch Jebb with the first piece?
Mitch, yeah. I mean,
okay. Jebb, last time I can't lie. I've not checked in on Jebb.
He's been horrible.
I know. Last time I checked in, it was bad.
It's really bad.
I was giving Alex Farah a hard time for that one, because I know he loved Mitch Jebb, and I was like, you check in recently. But that said, he is a really good bat to ball guy historically. It could be a good buy low opportunity, change of scenery, and Brian De La Cruz is not going to bring in a franchise altering haul. Jun-Silk Shim I love because he's hurt, unfortunately, and that seems to be a theme so far through the early parts of his career. But if it works out for him, that's a guy that can change the scope of things. He is a guy that with the Marlins, development on the pitching side, with what he's capable of. I mean, it's a fastball in the upper 90s. Some of the characteristics are crazy. That's a guy that very far off, but if it works out, could be a monster and a really good piece for you. So, if you're going to cash in on a De La Cruz, I think you could go either the route of the higher floor Williamson type, or just buy low on one guy and shoot for the stars on another guy that could, flame out in the lower levels or be a really impactful arm. I actually really like that. And I do think with the talent that the Pirates have, and, a guy like Xander Muith, who they just drafted and has been pitching at the complex, has kind of lapped, Jun-Silk Shim at this point. Hunter Barco has surpassed Shim at this point, probably because of just being available and what they're doing. I think that could be an opportunity where the Marlins actually get a little bit more bang for their buck because of just the way that they match up with the Pirates. And again, I think the Pirates are, if they're going to make a trade, probably hunting control.
Right. Yeah. Let me ask you though, going back to Eli's trade with Brian De La Cruz, you attach one of these relievers with De La Cruz to Seattle. What doors does that open?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I think all of a sudden you start to maybe tap into that tier 2, or and I would put Williamson in that tier 2, but another potential, tier 2 guy there. Michael Arroyo is a name that I really like. Yeah, he's maybe limited defensively to an average second base or passable third base, but again, another guy that just would be a rarity in the Marlins system that is just mashed really at every stop so far. He's 19 years old. I'm pretty sure has an OPS over 900 right now in low A, if I'm not mistaken.
He's killing it.
That's a guy that I think fits right in immediately. So maybe that's somebody that, it gets unlocked, because again, you look at the guys ahead of him. Farmelo, of course, hurt after season, and then you have Ty Pete, as we mentioned, who might be a little bit too much of a reach. Tyler Locklear seems like he's not going to be available. Ryan Bliss has become a guy that's ending up helping them right now in the infield. So Arroyo could be that name that they end up kind of unlocking if they do include a reliever. And shit, I mean, he'd be one of the better guys right away.
Do you think Fauché gets that done with Dela Cruz? I don't think that. I think Tanner or Nardi.
That would have to be.
I was going to say Cronin or Fauché. I think Scott, you deal separate, you deal individually or with another relief. I don't know if they want to attach Tanner Scott to Brian De La Cruz, but I think one of those three non-Tanner Scott relievers that we've mentioned.
Yeah, I think a Cronin and a De La Cruz can get you to unlock Arroyo in that deal, and again, that would be a really good spot for the Marlins.
I guess I'll ask you, Aram, with Luzardo real quick, and we're not going to, obviously he's injured, but what do you think a healthy Luzardo would have garnered in this deadline? Because you look at what there was in the offseason, you had that Corbin Burns trade, which I believe was DL Hall, another prospect, and Joey Ortiz. Right now you look at it, Joey Ortiz would have been the shortstop of the future for the Marlins. DL Hall would have been a nice piece in the rotation or even in the bullpen, and I can't remember there was a third prospect, but that probably would have been
that was it. Yeah, and I think a comp pick as well, right? If I'm
okay, then yeah, it was probably the comp pick. Yeah,
but Ortiz would be the answer at shortstop, no doubt about that. That's a prospect I've liked for a really long time. But I also understand the apprehension there, given that Ortiz had struggled at that point, and his limited big league sample, is older as a prospect, 25. And DL Hall comes with plenty of baggage. Unfortunately, he's been hurt, for a decent part of this year. But I do think it would have been probably even a little bit more than that, even though he hasn't been pitching that great this year. You look at the market was either a Garrett Crochet who is blowing past any amount of innings we've really ever seen him throw. And yes, he's throwing better than Luzardo, but also doesn't have the track record that Luzardo has. And I think a lot of teams would want to add and buy with control. And what other options are there out there other than Luzardo? So I think it would have been that type of haul, if not more. I think you would have been looking at 2 top 100 guys and then another good piece. And that's the really frustrating part, because I think especially if the White Sox decided to hold on to Crochet, the Marlins would have had pretty much a chance to set the market pitching wise. I don't think there's really a lot of other options there that would have been much more valuable than a Luzardo, who also has pitched in 3 postseasons now as well, which is a very underrated aspect of what he brings to the table. And has he been dominant in all of them? No, but he's pitched in 3 postseasons. And a guy that you don't see that a lot with young controllable pieces coming from crappy teams, that they have that postseason experience as well. So I think there would have been a lot of value to him there, and they could have got a nice haul, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, Trevor Rogers, he pitched in the postseason in 2020, one game when they were already kind of like a lost cause. I only bring that up because prior to this, Aram, you mentioned, I don't know if I think you were serious about the possibility.
Oh, I was dead serious.
Yeah, him to the Astros. Just walk people through what you may have been thinking there, because the Astros have pretty much the same caliber of pitching injuries that the Marlins do, but they're obviously trying to compete this year.
Yeah. So I was just trying to think about how the Astros typically operate. And yes, we saw them be more aggressive last year for sure. And that was surprising to see them, part with a Drew Gilbert and a Ryan Clifford. And I think the fact that the Mets were willing to eat a ton of money on a Hall of Fame pitcher definitely helps with control on that front. But I think when you look at their system, it's from those trades is a little bit depleted. They don't have a ton of assets, but they do have still enough to go get pieces like a Trevor Rogers. Trevor Rogers, I think, has like a 3.27 ERA, something like that, over his last 7 starts. Like, he's starting to settle in a little bit. But the Astros notoriously, they buy low on guys, and they figure out how to get a little bit out of them again. And I know the Marlins are a great factory for pitching, but sometimes you just need a new set of eyes and a new environment to figure something out. And we know that Rogers can create unique angles, has unique stuff. And I think the Astros could look at him as a candidate that they could, buy lowish on and maximize. And also, they don't have the capital to go compete for a Crochet or go compete for some of the top arms on the market. And they might not want to risk that because they are still kind of tweeners right now. Yes, they've won 5 straight, but I think when they make a move here, it's going to be a move to help them this year, but also set them up for success beyond this year, and not be a move where you're pushing all the chips forward. I think the Astros are the perfect fit for that exact reason. And I think when you look at like a matchup there's more than enough prospects there, I think, in the Astros system that would make a lot of sense for the Marlins. Joey Loperfido now at the big league level, and probably a piece for them. I would love to see him with the Marlins, of course, but I don't think he's going anywhere. But they've got guys like Zach DeZenzo, who's a third baseman that may end up being the contingency plan to Alex Bregman, but also could be a guy that's available. I love Jacob Melton. That might be a little bit lofty, but a Luis Baez, also another outfield prospect that is a little bit further off, but exciting. Bryce Matthews, I'd imagine, is untouchable. So that's the guy that you can kind of pencil in maybe at third base, and maybe he's kind of leapfrogged DeZenzo. So I just feel like from that group alone, there's enough guys there that I think would be really good gets for the Marlins. Makes a lot of sense for the Astros, and they're not parting with, let's say they don't part with a Melton, Baez, or Matthews. That's a non-starter. DeZenzo would be immediately, I think, the third baseman of the future for the Marlins. And again, that's a position of need. And then a Kennedy Corona, or even, I mean, you could throw in a few different outfielders that are worth a shot in that system. A Pedro Leon, screw it, see what he can do. I think anything built around that. Shea Whitcomb, he's playing pretty well, and he can play shortstop. That could be your flyer at short. Like, they've got enough pieces there where it can be guys that actually fill out roles for the Marlins and could actually be solid for them.
And
look at this. This is Trevor Rogers pitching in the postseason in Minute Maid Park. He can do it.
Yeah, and then with Trevor, real quick, he, like Luzardo, he becomes a free agent in 27. So I mean, they would have him for a bit there. But Eli Isaac, anything you guys left on the back burner worth, I guess, thrown out there for the fun?
Yes, this was someone that I circled like a few days ago, and I forgot. And you guys talked about the Astros. What does it take for Luis Baez? That guy is a stud.
He hits bombs. It would be difficult. It would definitely be difficult.
Give them De La Cruz back, give them Trevor Rogers back, and give them Tanner Scott. Deal.
What I could see is, like, a lot of times teams, they don't want to trade one like that Baez plus other guys. Like, and they'll finally bend and say, okay, you want Baez, it's just Baez for Rogers. Maybe that could be the way that they do it. Maybe it's another one of those you throw in a prospect the other way, because the Astros do always like to get something back too in that regard. I think it would be hard, and I still think it would be worth it though if Melton, Baez, Matthews are not available. That DeZenzo or some of these other guys could still be worth it enough. And they have a lot of upper minors guys that I still think could help this team and just fill roles, even like a Will Wagner. So it might be hard. But if you throw in, a reliever with control, I know they've already invested so much in the bullpen, but that might almost make them more willing to go get a cheaper arm like a Cronin or whoever that has control. If you throw in a reliever there too, Baez, I think then becomes very attainable. And then you could probably pair in a couple of those other upper minors guys and becomes a nice package for the Marlins. But Baez would instantly become the Marlins, I think, best power hitting prospect.
I had a Tanner Scott trade to Philadelphia for Eduardo Tate and Jose Rodriguez. Phillies need a reliever pretty badly too. So I don't know. I mean, Philadelphia's farm system's definitely improved, but it's still not, one of the best out there. But I mean, what would you say to that?
I would love that if I'm a Marlins fan, because yes, Tate's far off, but he's a left-handed hitting catcher in another position where, like, that's why, like, when people talk about the Marlins situation, we always acknowledge catcher, center field, shortstop, and then even third base, where, like, organizationally you can't point towards, oh, that guy hopefully will be the future there. Maybe Joe Mack at catcher now.
This guy hates Will Banfield. It's just, geez, man, you hate that guy.
I'm excited for him. He snapped a dry spell.
Sure.
I like him. You guys have made me almost not like him now as a player. But no, I'm always rooting for him. He's a good guy. No, I mean, you look at Tate. I mean, that would instantly be their best upside piece behind the dish. And then, obviously you're not going to get a Kaba or some of these other guys, especially if it's in division. And I think if you're Dombrowski and you're trading in division, it's only going to be guys that are far off. Because he'll be like, by the time Tate's there, I'll be retired and hopefully have a World Series. I'm sure that's how Dombrowski's seeing it. I think that'd be a great way to cash in on a reliever to potentially, get the guy that could be the catcher of your future. He's just 17, but the Marlins just need more irons in the fire.
Yeah. And I'm trying to just look through their entire roster on every single minor league affiliate. And dear Lord, they have question marks in almost every single prime position. And if you're Peter Bendix, why do you even take this job? Like, holy crap. Talk about the work you have to do. I mean, there's not a single good player in the entire system. I guess really quick before we end this, I'm sure you've been following Noble and Thomas White. Which one do you favor?
Ooh. So it's funny. They're the top 100 update. Those were two guys that climbed significantly.
Yeah.
I think it's two very different profiles.
Of course.
And I like them both for their exact, like, for who they are, if that makes sense. Because, like, I love the funky release and unique stuff type of arms, like a Noble Meyer, because I think that upside is immense. Like, that, what that can become when you command your stuff and you find the third pitch there, because the fastball is going to get a ton of lifts. The slider is going to play unbelievably well from that release. Like, he has more of that, like, sky's the limit upside. But then Thomas White, I've been floored by the feel for 3 pitches. Like, the fastball, we knew that was a good fastball. I didn't think it was this good. The changeup being what it is. Again, we knew it was good. I didn't think it was going to be this good. And then the curveball is just nasty as well. And he's locating both of those secondaries for a strike right around a 60% clip, which is great for a teenage left-hander who's 6'5". And then the fastball characteristics are great. I've been floored by what White can do, and I think he's continued to close that gap. But I think just the upside of Meyer is going to give him the edge at this point. But someone asked on the mailbag for the call-up and was like, who's someone that you could see making the biggest leap on the top 100, in the next update? And Thomas White was one of the names I mentioned because, if he's doing this at the AA level, which I think he can do, I think he's going to get an opportunity to maybe by the end of the year. But even if he's continuing to do it in high A and fill up the zone with these 3 pitches, clearly there's some funkiness to the way he hides the ball and hitters just don't like it. I think people are going to start to get really excited about him, like, really quickly. And I think he's going to start to become one of the better young pitching prospects in baseball. And he's touching 99, man. Like, and it's low effort. It's really fun.
And it's a slurve too, what he told us. It's more of a slurve than just a pure 12-6. It's a hell of a breaking pitch. I've been so impressed with these 2 high school kids. It's been, and I'm glad you put this up there, Eli. Now, the last thing I'm going to bother you with, Aram, obviously Dylan Head is the best position player prospect in this organization, without a doubt. Like, obviously. Yeah. Thank you. Can you explain why you think he's better than Victor Mesa Jr. to my colleagues over here? We had an argument. We were doing our Fish on First Top 30 list, and they didn't let me put Victor Mesa Jr. behind Dylan Head. And I was very furious with that.
Well, with the injury now, I think it becomes more wide open. But I like Mesa a lot. Obviously, we had a conversation a little while ago, and I was trying to sell him as the best position player prospect. But I think with Dylan Head, and he just hasn't had a chance to get his feet under him as a pro, obviously. What I was so floored with as an amateur and then the early parts of his professional career is how comfortable he already is in center field. And Mesa's a great center fielder too, but Head has a chance to be a really, really, really good defender out there. The field of hit was very impressive to me too. And I know it wasn't quite translating, but again, I felt like it was more of just not being able to get those consistent reps. And then flashing above average exit velocities already at times, like especially to the pull side. We're seeing him pop like 106s, 107s with kind of low effort. I hope that the speed, is maintained after the surgery and all that, but we're talking about an easy 70 runner. We're talking about a guy that has a chance to be an above average hit tool guy. And then a guy that has a chance to at least have, you hope for fringy, but maybe even average power. I think it's more likely going to be fringy, but you're seeing flashes of that. I just thought there was so much to dream on here. Again, those further off guys, there's more risk, but when you have that glove in center and that speed, it becomes just a more of a preferential thing. Of course, Victor Mesa Jr., he's very close, and he has the floor of a 4th outfielder. I think at this point you can say that.
That's generous. I don't know about that.
I like the glove in center, so I'm willing to give him that higher floor. But I do think that when you look at what Head can do, it's kind of like all of the things that Mesa's grown into, but with the sliders turned up a little bit, maybe not as much power, but I think you could dream on a little bit more hit. So I'll always lean on that upside when a guy like Mesa's probably capped, right? At best, you're looking at a slightly above average regular, and that makes it a little bit more difficult for me.
Yeah, I'm on the side that Victor Mesa Jr.'s ceiling is a 4th outfielder. Unfortunately,
he's sneaky young, dude. He is young.
22.
He's young. Oh, he's very young. I know he was very young when they signed him in what was it, at the end of 2019?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think a ceiling is in between, like being a fringe regular. Like I can't think of a comp.
Well, I mean, maybe it's a bias. I mean, it's definitely a bias, but he's been in the organization now 6 years, and I feel like aside from all the tangibles you talked about, I feel like I have a pretty good feel for his makeup, and he's a really strong makeup guy.
I can speak to that even a little too. He's
whatever his tools are going to lead him to, he really loves ball, really genuinely, and the intangibles outside of that, I think he's going to reach whatever the best version of himself is, and he has time on his side. It's So I agree with basically everything you guys said, but it's kind of unfair to Head because we haven't gotten to know him much at all to this point, given his limited time in pro ball and his limited time in the organization. It's just that this is more about still very confident about Mesa, and I hope he gets to the big leagues this year, just because that was one of my bold predictions this year, is that he would get a short stint in the big leagues this year. There's no rush, but he's on the 40 man. He's come back down to earth a little bit as a hitter since getting off to a great start at AAA, but still he's one of the few good ones in this org right now.
Did you guys have Mesa on the show? I thought I remembered. No.
Not on our show. I spoke to him one-on-one when he was in the fall league, and the interview, the audio kind of got butchered from that, but I put it into the story, and I've gotten to know him pretty well, but we haven't had him on this pod.
He's a cool guy.
He's a funny dude. He's a funny dude. I know they love him in Jacksonville, but like he's a funny guy. I think like one of the few that the conversations I'll have, like when, for interviews or whatever it may be, like he just makes you laugh more than anyone. I think the Messi story is pretty absurd. Like he's a cool guy. I do agree. Like the makeup is a big differentiator there. Especially when you see, his the direction where it can go the other way, and how it can end up being something that you get in your own way, which has happened with some Marlins prospects as well. So I think it's definitely something that can be a separator there. And the Jacksonville team's fun. I can't lie, it's been fun. Troy Johnson was on Cycle Watch today on his birthday. Nice. He was home run and triple, and then that was it, unfortunately. But happy birthday to Troy. I know he's starting to heat up a little bit.
They'll give him a shot.
They got a few guys in Jacks that should get a shot this year, I think.
They'll give him and Griff a shot. I think VMJ gets a shot as well. Like if you're not going to do it this year, I guess they have a lot of time next year. But
yeah.
And VMJ's lowered the strikeout rate. He's walking a bit more. I mean, he kind of cooled back down to his usual standards. Now he's under 100 WRC plus. But I mean, you have nothing to lose. You have nothing to lose with bringing him up at this point in the season. Obviously, I don't agree with Isaac saying the ceiling's a fourth outfield, because they can still play pretty good corner spots no matter what. And if Jazz is going to be here for a couple more years, who knows? You'll have VMJ to play the corners, and he could do it better than probably anyone on the current Major League roster.
Yes.
So by a wide margin.
Better defensively than Jesus Sanchez and Brian De La Cruz? Are you sure?
I don't know, man. It's pretty close. No, I'm joking, but yeah, I mean, he's a cool guy. He's probably listening to this. He listens to our stuff. What was it? It was during spring training that he told me that I didn't pick. I picked him too late, or Isaac picked him in the call-up contest thing, and how did I pass up on him? And I was like, man, no.
What did I pick him? Third?
You picked him like in the second to last round or something. But
hold on just a moment, and I'll put this up as our final segment, because we are really rambling and getting off track here. But
I was trying to remember where it must have been with Alex though, where I saw him on there. But like, he's always good for a funny soundbite if you run into him.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that refers to himself as the chosen one has to be funny.
There we go.
Oh, the call-up contest there.
Yeah.
When you guys did this before the season?
Yeah.
Great pick, Kevin.
Even before spring training, I think.
Great pick, Cat. Let me see who's
Roddery. Dan, Josh Simpson, you're screwed. Are you talking about Roddery or Griffin Conine for Kevin?
Griff's a W.
There we go. Yeah,
930 OPS in AAA. He's getting up there, bro.
Yeah, he's gonna get a shot. I can all but yeah.
Another homer today.
Yeah.
Carver's isn't looking too hot.
Mine isn't. I don't know if they're going to give Banfield.
Well, you need to.
Banfield just snapped an 0 for 34, I believe.
Yeah,
he did go deep yesterday.
He was struggling real bad. He hadn't gotten a hit. He was like 1 for June or something. It was really bad.
Oh my gosh, jeez.
Or something crazy. Maybe I'm exaggerating.
I think it's leading because Eli needs to check off Mr. Eli Villalobos.
Yeah, I don't know who wins that one. I think Kevin probably wins that.
I'm already no. I don't think
Palacios ain't getting up. I don't even know who Elvis Alvarado is. I can't lie.
No, because I already got Villalobos. He's up. He deserves a check mark. And then
Monteverde. Oh yeah, I didn't fully update this. You're right. Villalobos did get his check mark, even though he's actually not in the organization anymore.
Right,
the time he's on with Detroit.
Oh, Detroit.
I mean, pitching staff wise, Monteverde may be up there next week. I don't know with the pace they're on. I was just looking at roster resource. They got 4 names in the Marlins rotation, and 3 of them are already a reach. So we might see Pat up there
for sure. Alrighty, we're gonna wrap it up here. We had a 54 minutes. Great conversation with you, Aram. Thank you so much. Make sure to check on Aram at the Just Baseball Show. You could also check out his Prospects podcast, The Call Up, which is amazing. Definitely tune into that. Highly suggest it. Aram, thank you so much for hopping on. From Isaac, from Eli, myself. We'll see you guys all in 2 weeks. Peace out and go fish.